You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor. Subscribe to the channel. Leave your comments below. Be sure to smash that like button. So the SEC Coaches Teleconference was on Wednesday. Both Mike Leach, Brian Kelly, and the other 12 league coaches all took their turn, 10 minutes, talking to the assembled media of the league. Mike Leach made one previous appearance in Tiger Stadium, of course, as a head coach. Important note, because he did coach here as a Kentucky assistant under Hal Mumme back in the 90s. But as a head coach, he made his appearance here with Mississippi State 2 years ago. And needless to say, when Mike Leach was asked about the environment of Tiger Stadium, he probably didn't have too much overwhelming to say.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, they're all have their unique environment and traditions and things like that, and obviously Tiger Stadium's one of the most unique and exciting and the best. So we're definitely looking forward to playing there.
Calm down, Mike. It's only Wednesday. We wouldn't want you to get too amped up before kickoff. Of course, when Mike Leach came to Baton Rouge in 2020, it was the first game of the COVID year. LSU's capacity was less than 50%, so it was a sparse crowd in Tiger Stadium, a day game. Bo Pelini was ill-equipped to have LSU's defense prepared for what they saw, obviously, with Mike Leach's team in that air raid, and KJ Costello threw for an SEC record passing yardage in that game. So the key for LSU this week, twofold. Number one is going to be tackle and slow down the air raid. I mean, that's just a gigantic part of this for LSU. And Brian Kelly's talked about that extensively, did so on Monday, did again today about stopping the air raid. But for me, as big a part of this game is going to be for LSU, slowing down Mississippi State offensively, which, by the way, I think they'll be able to do. We've run through this a little bit already this week, but the perception of Mississippi State offensively is Oregon under Chip Kelly. They go so fast and they score 60 a game. That's not exactly it. I mean, LSU played a 28-25 game last year against these guys. It's more they are more ball control than you'd think. They just use the passing game for ball control instead of the running game. So I don't know necessarily that I'm expecting this super high-scoring game. Vegas has the total in the low 50s, so you're expecting a game in the mid-20s, right? The mid-upper 20s, similar to what we saw a year ago, and I think that's going to happen. But for LSU to be competitive, they're going to have to run the football. And I think Brian Kelly made some comments today about the running game through two games where you saw really different performances, struggling against Florida State, then getting going a little bit against Southern, but clearly who you played mattered.
I think it's hard for me to evaluate our running game right now. The competition last week, it's not a clear evaluator. I think we were better up front, and it was easier for us to run the football. I think as we get into SEC play, and in particular a team like Mississippi State, we'll get a better assessment of what that running game looks like. Look, it has to be consistent for us, and I look at run efficiency in terms of third down conversions, in terms of averaging 4 yards per gain, in terms of efficiency of the running game, more so than yards per game and how much you rush for. Those can be misleading numbers at times, and so the efficiency's been pretty good, but I think I can evaluate it better when we start to get into SEC play.
I love the way that he pointed that out, because it's true. It's not necessarily your total rushing yardage. It is how efficient you are in running the football. And you could look at LSU's rushing yardage against Florida State and maybe think they were better than they really were because of the day Jaden Daniels had scrambling. That doesn't mean that you were good or effective in running the football against Florida State. And similarly, because you had success against Southern, doesn't necessarily mean that you're really good at running the football that day. You were just facing an overmatched opponent. For Mississippi State, they're running it for 100 yards a game, 101 to be exact, and 385 through the air so far through two games. But Mississippi State's rush defense is really the story. It's the one that pops. They're allowing 85 yards per game in their two games. This last week, they went on the road to Tucson and faced Arizona, albeit I'll grant you an overmatched Arizona team, but an Arizona team that is improved there in Tucson. And Arizona was held to just 40 rushing yards on 22 attempts. It's not like Arizona didn't try to run the football. They just couldn't. They averaged 1.8 yards a carry against Mississippi State. This is a very good defensive front, similar to what LSU saw against Florida State. So the challenge is much, much greater. The difference this go around, obviously, is that LSU is going to have John Emery. And Brian Kelly continues to sort of temper expectations for John Emery as he returns to the fold.
Big, he's explosive. He's bigger than the backs that we've had. Now, Noah Kane's got some size to him, but, he's got a little bit more speed and catches the ball well. I mean, look, he hasn't played in a year, so, for all of us, it's kind of like, let's see what he's got. We've seen what he can do in a practice situation, but, that's a big difference when it comes to game. He can't play a whole game because obviously he hasn't played in a year, but I think he's going to complement what we have already. He's got all the things that you look for in a back, but he just hasn't played very much. So we're not going to ask him to do too much, but we're going to give him the opportunity to insert himself into the game and see what he can do to, get our running game moving.
It's so interesting to think about not playing John Emery more because he hasn't played much. It almost feels counterintuitive. It's almost like, well, he's got fresh legs because he hasn't played much. As a freshman in 2019, he played in 10 games but had only 39 rushes. Of course, that was the national championship year. Carried the ball 39 times as a freshman. During the COVID year, he played in 9 of the 10 games, had 3 starts, and led, was second on the team in rushing, with just 378 yards. The best game of his career was that game against Vanderbilt, when the week after LSU lost to Mississippi State, they went on the road and beat Vanderbilt, and Emery had 103 yards on 12 carries. The most attempts he's had in a career is 18. That was the win against South Carolina when TJ Finley started. So, that's been 2 years. So I think Brian Kelly is right to temper expectation on John Emery. The physical skill set is there. That's undeniable. It's why he's a 5-star. It's why he's going to have a chance to play at the next level, regardless of what he does this year. Someone's going to give him a chance to go run in an NFL camp and see if he can play. But we also just haven't seen John Emery do much. It's kind of along the same lines of the conversation that a lot of people were having about Garrett Nussmeier before the season. You see the promise, the potential, but you really haven't seen it on the field. But the same is true with all of these running backs. And the underlying truth, the bigger picture truth to me is, I don't care how good your back is. If your line can't block, it doesn't matter. So I'm going to say this week the same thing that I said week 1 against Florida State, and that's that Jaden Daniels is going to be your leading rusher against Mississippi State out of necessity. And it's not going to be design runs. It's going to be scrambles because that's just how it's going to have to be, because I don't think LSU's line is going to be effective enough in moving bodies against Mississippi State. They're just not that good yet. Maybe they will progress to that point throughout the season, but I don't think that's going to be the case on Saturday in Tiger Stadium. My hope for John Emery is that he busts a big play. If John Emery through this game gets 6 or 8 touches, somewhere in that range, my hope is that one of them goes for 45 and puts you in a position to flip the field or get points. That's what I think is in a game that I think is going to be very close. That's one where you may look and say, okay, that was a differentiator. That was a game changer. That's where you were pinned in your own territory and he busted one for 50 yards. Like that big burst play from John Emery. It might only be one, but that's what I'm looking for this weekend with John Emery against Mississippi State. And hopefully, as the season goes along, his workload can increase, working in tandem with LSU's offensive line improving, and that run game may get better and better and better as they go along through the season. But the long-awaited return of John Emery is almost at hand. It'll be Saturday against Mississippi State in Tiger Stadium. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.